magnitude 7.8 earthquake occurred, and followed by a, again, very large magnitude 7.5 earthquake 9 hours after to the buildings that's been already heavily damaged. So that exacerbated the damage and fatalities, and I don't think we still yet to have the final numbers, but the pictures are looking very grim. This is one thing that we call it like a worst case scenario. You normally look like try to figure out whether you can solve your fragility issues with the buildings with a one large earthquake, but once that one large earthquake and then you have another giant earthquake, then that really significantly imagine you are in a boxing match and then you are about to fall down, and then one final punch, and that final punch was the magnitude 7.5 earthquake. Nevertheless, this means by no means this should have occurred in terms of the damage to the cities, and that also shows some lack of building inspections and lack of code implementation and lack of preparations. A lot of things can play a large role, but one important thing could be the building quality, could be the building, how the buildings were built, how the building was designed, but sometimes it's based on the probability of buildings experiencing that level of shaking failing. But none of the building codes in the world would foresee building collapses. That's the main goal for the building codes. Buildings shouldn't collapse. Yes, maybe they should be unusable, but total collapse of the buildings, as we are seeing the pancake style, that part is very unexpected in terms of properly applied building codes and properly performed building inspections. So I have shared a couple of maps. One of them shows the main shock magnitude 7.8 main shock and how it's related to magnitude 7.5 triggered earthquake. So this magnitude 5 point, if you stick with the first image, if that's possible, yes, that one, if you can hold that one, if it's possible. So what we are seeing here is what is called Coulomb stress change. What we are able to do is we can calculate stress transfer based on the main shock to see how this earthquake could trigger or inhibit failures in surrounding faults. And what you are seeing in the white stars, 6 February 2023, that magnitude 7.8 earthquake transfer increased stress alongside the end of the fault, and also it increased stress.
Az daha çok
Suyun altında kalmış ya, düşmüş aşağı inecek.
Aftershocks and triggered events, but our problem is forecasting the main shock. If you think world as a whole, what we are calling is in the mid-oceans, we have it's called mid-oceanic rift. So these are the places that hot magma comes to the surface, to the seafloor, and then pushes the plate sideways as the material, the hot lava, constantly coming to the surface and pushes the plate. And then when you are pushing the plate in one side, what happens is when the plate meets another plate, whichever plate is older will go under that plate. So the older plate would be much denser. So think about the earth crust looks solid, but it's actually made up with a bunch of plates, and that plates are constantly in movement. In Turkey's perspective, what makes Turkey so seismically active is Turkey is being pushed between Arabian Peninsula, Arabian plate and Eurasian plate in both sides. So if you look at this figure, both East Anatolian Fault and North Anatolian Fault are the boundaries of that movement. And Turkey is essentially like a watermelon seed being pushed by the Arabian plate in the south and Eurasian plate on the north. And Turkey is in constant movement, 10 millimeter or 20 millimeter per year towards Greece. And that's what drives the East Anatolian Fault, the quake that occurred in the East Anatolian Fault, or the North Anatolian Fault, which is the famous fault that ruptured in the most spectacular dominoes that we ever seen, starting from 1939 and until the 1999 Düzce earthquake. It ruptured 5 separate events, 20, 30 years apart, and create the most spectacular earthquake interaction sequence that we ever seen. Earthquake usually interacts via two main way. One of them is the what we are calling is the deformation way, or the static Coulomb stresses, where because of the fault deformation, how the fault slips and then creates a deformation zone around it, and that makes some areas around that rupture more likely to rupture next, or some areas would be less likely to rupture next because the movement actually lock their movement. It's not favoring that faults to be moving anymore. As you prefaced it, it's a difficult question to answer. However, what we know is magnitude 7.8 earthquake and magnitude 7.5 earthquake already occurred. So these are very, very large earthquakes. So even if we had earthquake in the same size, that's already a bad enough scenario for us. So I don't think we need to worry about much larger earthquake than this, because we have already experienced a huge earthquake, and that doesn't mean that we won't have larger events. But I think given the level of how difficult it is to recover from these events, that quake, maybe we shouldn't even worry about it at this point.
Every earthquake scientist wishes, of course, that we could predict earthquakes, but the Earth system is just too complicated. There's thousands of faults. There's motions on all of these different faults, lots of different kinds of rocks under the Earth, and of course the earthquakes happen at 10 or 20 kilometers depth, where we can't really see what's going on. And so although people have tried for decades to find ways to identify earthquakes before they happen, it's been unsuccessful. Aftershocks, but we do know that after an earthquake we're going to see aftershocks, and in some cases triggered earthquakes, which is something we've already seen with this earthquake. There was a magnitude 7.5 about 9 hours after the initial earthquake triggered on a second fault, and it's possible that we could see more triggering. So right now is a time to be especially careful, because we know we'll see more shaking from at least smaller earthquakes, and there remains the possibility of an earthquake of the same magnitude or even larger on another section of the fault. I would never say we're in the clear. Every earthquake destabilizes the crustal stresses, and so that means all of the faults are now experiencing new stresses that they've never experienced before, which puts us at higher risk. And what you're seeing on the screen now is, I guess it was an image of Coulomb stress